convened. We could rise for the invocation of pledge by Councilman Johnson.
Good morning. Sorry, let me get the fog out of my glasses. Apologies. Let our thoughts and prayers reach out to people around the world that have been personally impacted by COVID-19. To those that have lost their lives, may they be remembered. To those that have lost a mother, a father, a daughter, a son. To those that have lost a leader among us. To those that will not benefit from the gift of victims living out their natural life here on our planet Earth. We reach out to their souls to make peace with our collective loss. To all the warriors in the fight against the common foe, to our first responders, to our nurses, our doctors, our scientists that fight the war tirelessly day after day. We pledge our support and love for them, their families, and their contributions to the battles we fight. To our leaders locally, regionally, state, federal, and worldwide, we ask that you put aside politics and stand beside each other to defeat this common foe. And finally, to Betty Ruane and her family, we ask that everyone rise up and carry her to recovery as she fights her own personal challenge with recovery from her terrible accident. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Lane.
Here.
Mr. Denham.
Yes.
Mr. Mon.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
Next, I'll take public comment for non-agenda items. Anything that's not on the agenda you'd like to speak about, please raise your hand. I'll go to the right side of the room. Seeing none, I'll go to the left side of the room. Come on, sir.
Paul McKinney. I'm a resident, and like everybody else, I have to do nothing but give praise to this council for what it has done on Irma, what it has done in the finances, and what it's done, what for years was the main thing, water. And in water, it was follow the science. Unfortunately, this is no longer follow the science, it's follow the politics. If you look on the front page of the New York Times yesterday morning, the lead story is 15,000 new cases in Florida in day break a record for the US in any state, province, any place in the world. That's what Florida has done. And Southwest Florida has been at the top of that too. What is the one single thing that will do the most, and it costs next to nothing? It's wear the damn mask, as Senator Rubio said. Wear the mask. Dick Cheney is saying, all in caps, wear the mask. When the CDC on April 3rd said, wear the masks, there were 7,000 dead. We've now seen the politicalization of that, and we're now in the 130-some thousands. That's what's happened. You've all seen the numbers. As of Sunday, I don't know why there wasn't anything entered by the city yesterday, but it's up to 26 cases. Lee County has got 1,273, 187 dead. The Larry Anichuchi, the president and CEO of Lee Health, says wear a mask. It's been scientifically proven, so on and so forth. Wear the mask. This weekend, the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation estimates that universal masking could save 45,000 lives by November 1st. To put that in perspective, over a decade, this country was torn apart, whatever your politics may have been over the Vietnam War. You could save 90% of that just by wearing a mask between now and November 1st. With all that, has this body said universal masking? Absolutely not. So in closing, Dr. Fauci last night said, "You have not begun to see the end of this." Unfortunately, he is once again right. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, council comments. I'd like to lead us up.
Yeah, well, I just really have not very little to say other than I'm, like I guess the rest of us, anguishing over what's going on in our community and in our state, in the country right now. My thoughts are consumed by that. I think about it all the time, and I worry about it all the time, and I just think we all collectively have to do whatever we need to do to try and protect ourselves, their community, and I think it's a very worrying time for us all, and I feel for those people that have suffered through this devastating illness. And what is scary for me is that we're beginning to hear from our scientific community that even if you recover from the pandemic, the lasting effects from that, once you clear the hospital, could well be significant. And I'm beginning to believe that it impacts your organs and various parts of your body for a longer period of time. So it is a very worrying time, and as I said, I anguish over it, I'm consumed by it. And I hope there is some turning point in this sometime in the not too distant future. That's all I have to say.
Very well said, Mr. Vice Mayor, and I echo those comments. All I'm going to say is simply, I'm on this council to represent the citizens of this island, and I'll continue to do so to the best of my ability and make the difficult decisions as we move forward together to make sure that our citizens are put first. And I thank you for the opportunity.
I too share comments with my fellow council members. I know this is a tough time for all of us to deal with. I think this is the opportunity by which not only this council, but also leaders throughout the world, and each one of us has the ability to lead, not only in what you do yourself, but also what you influence others to do. And I think the evidence is clear that we all need to be taking precautions for ourselves and looking after our own personal safety. But with this insidious virus that's out there, I think one of the things that we've missed is that the precautions that I need for myself and my family, friends, and others actually comes from other people. So the actions that you may take personally have impacts well beyond just your own being. So just consider those as you make your decisions, and we continue to move forward in this fight.
My only comment is with regards to how proud I am to serve with this council, but more importantly to the mayor and the situation his mother and you have my family's and the whole council's great sympathy that is dealing with the things that we are dealing with now, adding to that concern for the life of us or of your mother. And it must be extremely difficult, Mayor. You have my sympathies, best wishes, and prayers for a swift recovery.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. I've sat up here for a long time and listened to people. I've knocked on more doors than anyone up here. I've gone and people continue to call me, having served for 14 years. No matter what decision the council makes, whether I'm in agreement or not, I'll always follow the council's decision. I believe in wearing masks, where I have a fundamental difference and have said on the record And I'm stating this mainly because when you read a letter to the editor that said I ran away from the mass vote, my mom wasn't sick. When people say things of that nature, after 14 years, I would hope I deserve better. But politics are the way they are. You can say whatever you want. It's free speech, and I get it. Mom went through a difficult surgery. You never want to get a call to say that she's on death's doorstep. I went up there and I would do it in a heartbeat. I don't think twice about it. But having said that, I came into the city back in 2007, and all the city wanted was less regulations, less taxes. We had organizations to basically say the city was bankrupt. We had just a tremendous situation where government was supposed to be involved less. There's even a real push to have the police department banned and go to the sheriffs. So I look at what's going on and having come from a different world, and I think I'm the only council person that's gotten sued up here. I think I'm the only council person that's had to pay for his own indemnity, with some confusion on an issue that really resonated from pension reform. So, if I'm a little guarded, there's reasons for it. I never envisioned not to wear a mask. I don't think it's proper safety. But in the same token, the difference is someone telling me to do it and me doing it are two different things. I also have different experiences, I've always said to people. My son had it, my brothers had it. Just different strains of this. And clearly what my son had or my brother, I take that virus any day of the week. Because he got it, both got it with not a symptom in the world. So just for people to understand that, and on the insurance aspect and the constitutionality of it, I do look at the aspects and I do look at what the chief has to go through and the pressures that the police are underneath. I can't even believe we live in an age today where people disrespect the police the way they do. Chief, I thank you for all you do. I can't imagine the pressures you're underneath, and we're just trying to understand the pressures associated with it. As far as I'll talk about it under COVID. I have no intention, and I follow Robert's rules to the law, of trying to bring a motion up to change this council's mind. It's one that's been made. I can have an opinion. It could differ. I will follow the law like anyone else does. I certainly recognize that I'm a role model in this community, recognize that I am, but my opinions are, and I've been told by so many people, I've lost my vote. And I can tell you I lost votes no matter what way I vote on this. So that's part of the situation. I'm a public servant. I've never gotten paid. I don't plan on, if I'm fortunate enough to win the election for Lee County, to get paid there either. So when people want to say it's political, when you do it for free, I don't know how it's political. I just believe in what I believe in, was raised that way. I'm not going to change at 60 years of age, to say the least. And I really wanted to put it on the record to hopefully purge out whatever concerns people had. It's unfortunate that there was an email, and my point of sitting up here and having 200 people come and comment is having knocked on a couple thousand doors in different elections. I've talked to a lot of people and people call me directly. I recognize, but when there's an effort that is organized, when the email went out on Saturday to say, here's what the mayor said, that's what really was the premise behind all the emails that came. And listen, I get it. I get people's opinions. I get that people are anxious, nervous, and I do understand the different severities of this strain. So I respect it. But in the same token, if I had to get it, I'd take my son's version any day of the week. And I'd be done with it. He does have antibodies. I don't know how long they're waiting for or how long they're good. We have a lot of significant issues up here. I try to balance those, and maybe I have scars from being sued up here. Maybe I have scars from watching the city on the verge of bankruptcy. I walked up here and did different things than anyone else. So before you judge anyone in office, I think each person here, I respect. They've been attacked. I've heard people say you have a conflict, you're unethical. It's amazing the filters that people have or don't have. I'm certainly putting this on the record to indicate I was not for a mandatory mask. That doesn't mean I don't believe in them. don't think they're effective. They are. Recognize that, but my choice is my choice. When you have a choice to do something, you're able to do so. I'd rather just educate people. I'm hopefully doing this to address the 80 emails that came in. It's unfortunate that not many people listened to the entire interview. The people that did, even when they did, they basically mischaracterized what I said. In the spirit of it, you can pick a soundbite, a letter, a word, a sentence, and say whatever you want from it. But limited government is what Sanibel wanted back in 2007. Limited government and limited responsibilities is what they wanted, lower taxes. And to me, we are just creating a lot of additional responsibilities for this city. So closing just to, address the issues. And as a respect to Robert's rules, I'm certainly not going to do anything that's not within appropriate of Robert's rules. So having said that, I'll move on. And I'll take our first read. I'm sorry, we somehow slipped over Chuck Edelman for the Planning Commission. My bad. Sorry, Chuck. Somehow I missed you. I apologize.
And when Chuck's walking up, I'm gonna wait and reserve all of my comments when we're talking about COVID in response to anything.
I guess this is allowed.
Also distancing.
This one on?
Yeah.
Is it on now? Can you hear me?
Sure.
Good, thank you. Good morning.
Mine,
Good morning.
If it wasn't for the mask, it almost feel like business as usual. So I'm glad to be here to represent the Planning Commission. To report to you that we've actually had 2 meetings since the last time you heard a report from us. One in March 10th, which seems like the last century, and one on June 9th, which was our first meeting after the closure and the beginning of our life with the virus. On the 10th, the hearing was about St. Michael's. St. Michael's is going through a renovation of their office building that came in for a conditional use and development permit. We heard the case, staff did a good job of evaluating it, and the commission voted 7-0 in favor of the permits. On June 9th, we had a case before us about putting in a new dock. Interestingly, a new dock that needed to be a little bit higher because it's only going to be used for non-motorized craft, for launching for kayaks and so on. And it's in an area where there wasn't enough water. It was one of the first ones we've had where they actually wanted it higher. But it made all the sense. Staff did a good job of the analysis. Again, 7-0 vote in favor. Then we addressed an issue that you asked us to take a look at, and that is relates to seawalls, relates to deteriorating seawalls, and what's the way to go about fixing seawalls? And you asked us to look at a particular question, and that is there are apparently one or more contractors who are proposing to be able to put in a vinyl seawall that is 18 inches out from the existing seawall out into the water, so waterward. And leaving the old seawall or parts of the old seawall in place. Apparently this is a lot less cheaper, a lot less easier to do. You asked us to look at it and see you didn't ask us to decide if it was a good or a bad idea or within the rules or outside of the rules. I think you wanted us to understand the issue enough to know whether it would be worth really looking at our rules to see if we should allow this. So the staff did a pretty good job of analyzing the background on our seawall requirements and where seawalls are here. They also analyzed how other jurisdictions around Southwest Florida handle this particular issue. And as you might imagine, like everything else in Southwest Florida, it's all over the board, all over the map. There's no one consistent answer that people have. Staff pointed out several questions and concerns they had about the particular solution that we were looking at. Those concerns were pretty fundamental, including moving a seawall out 18 inches into a canal. Most of our seawalls are along canals. Has the impact of reducing the size of the canal, the width of the canal by 18 inches. Raises questions on where's the property line, and we just move the property line for these folks 18 inches. Raises questions on just narrowing the canal. Is that a good thing? Questions on what about the taxpayer owner across the canal who would like to put a dock in, but now might have 18 less inches to deal with and all the regulations we have about where you put a dock. What about the people next door to the person who puts the 18-inch seawall? How does that change water flow? How does it change their ability to actually use their property the way, and so on? So some pretty fundamental questions. We heard also from the audience concern that the vinyl that is being proposed to be used might have environmental impacts. It might not be a good thing to be using vinyl. Then we heard that vinyl is already being used to repair seawalls, not in this new way, but just putting a budding on old deteriorating seawalls as a replacement. So we've already got vinyl in our water. As we listened to this, there wasn't a lot of support for a one-off, let's look at this one narrow issue. Because we heard, probably the most important thing we heard is the seawalls that we have, the seawalls that have been installed traditionally on this island and apparently all over Florida, are not lasting near as long as everybody thought they would. These were 50-year or more things that were put in. They're lasting 20 to 30 years, apparently, is at least what we were told. So this is a problem. This deteriorating seawalls is not a problem that's going to go away. It's not a one-off problem. It's something that's probably going to accelerate over time. And we're going to be dealing with this over and over again. So after hearing, it's been a good hour, talking this through, hearing all sides, we came to a recommendation to you, and that is that you should authorize us to take a look at our regulations related to seawalls and seawall repair and seawall replacement. You should ask us to make sure that they're current, that they reflect current technology and current alternatives, and that they're appropriate so that our citizens can repair seawalls and replace them over time, which we are being told they're going to need to more than they have in the past. Personally, I don't think this is a big ask. I don't think this is a 2-summer project. There should probably be one meeting. Given the start we have, one meeting probably at our Land Development Council level, where we can ask some contractors to come in and explain different ways of fixing seawalls. We can get a little bit more information about where are we around the island, and some facts about how deteriorated are things and so on. And take a look at our rules and decide whether there are any needed changes. In that, of course, we would encompass, all right, we'll look at this idea of the cheaper way to fix the problem, but not in a vacuum. That would be part of looking at the whole thing. So the recommendation, not reading to you exactly the recommendation, but the recommendation to you is you should authorize us to make it a priority, to look at it this summer. I do think this is not a forever project. I don't think it's going to be a terrible burden on staff. And I do believe over time it will help lessen the burden on staff. If we get the rules right, so people know what they can do, we should have less contention, less time-consuming contention, if you will, from a city planning and building standpoint. So that's that's the extent of our discussion. I see you have this on your agenda.
Correct.
Later. And I, instead of waiting an hour and then talking about this again, I don't know exactly how the rules work, but why not? If you want, why don't we move that agenda item to here? And I've got with me Planning Commissioner Houlihan, who happens to be a retired lieutenant colonel in the Corps of Engineers. And among us, in this room at least, he may be the only person who's actually built seawalls. And he said he's built some big ones. So he's got some expertise in this area, and that expertise would help us at the Planning Commission level as we go through this. But Holly, you have
Mr. Mayor, if I may. Yeah, I had spoken to both Chair Ketterman and I had spoken to Attorney Agnew as well. We do have an agenda item 10C, and as we had discussed, I was going to ask the council's pleasure if we could just finish that 10C, bring it forward now, because he really has summarized what happened in the meeting. At the meeting, which seemed to be a very narrow focus for a contractor that actually had a contract that he wanted to move forward on, took on definitely a broader conversation. And I think it was a very fair conversation. And I did speak with Attorney Agnew about the expansion of the conversation based on what council has directed. And Attorney Agnew felt that what you all discussed and what you all are bringing forward as that recommendation is very valid. And I support that as well. And I would support a recommendation to council from council to the planning commission to move forward with looking at the seawall language that we have and seeing if there are changes that would be appropriate now. Certainly, you know, if somebody comes forward, it's just not a cost thing. It's so much more than that, because something's cheaper doesn't make it the right thing to do on Sanibel. So I certainly would support. I'm not sure that we really need any other conversation from any of the planning commissioners, only because if that is accepted to go back to you and directed to staff to be looking at the items that you were talking about, I'm very comfortable with that, and that should be handled at the planning commission level, not at city council today.
Is that a motion?
I would make a motion to, for the recommendation to send back to planning commission, looking at our seawall ordinances and bringing it current.
Could I ask you to make a motion and move it up first? And then
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Just one of you?
Certainly, yes, I would make a motion to move item 10C to right now.
Second.
Motion and second on the floor, any discussion of council? Any public comment? Seeing none, let's call the question.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ruane?
Yes,
Mr. Denham?
Yes.
Mr. Mon?
Yes.
Thank you.
you have the floor.
Okay, and then I would go ahead and ask council, make the motion to allow planning commission with planning department to do a study of the seawalls and look at what's going to be the newest language that's going to work within the city. If there's a clearer language, I'm sorry, I don't know what that should be.
Second.
Motion and second on the floor, any discussion?
All right, just a comment, if I may. You said 18 inches, but that's 18 inches from both sides. So it's actually,
I apologize, not you, it's my hearing.
you said 18 inches, but that's 18 inches from both sides, so it's actually 3 foot narrowing of the.
Well, I mean, both sides,
Yes.
if on a canal, on each side,
Right.
it's
Effectively.
3 feet, it's 3 feet.
Yes.
And on canals that we have pretty tight canals, as we know, because we deal with variances all the time related to that. That could be an issue.
Would this be a code review subcommittee issue, or would it be the full planning commission?
I guess, even though I've been on the planning commission for a long time, I'm not the world's expert on the process, but as I understand it, and I have to work this out with Mr. Ragland, that I think we start at the LDC, but then that goes to the full planning commission. The full planning commission, to the extent there were any recommendations that change, it would be the full planning commission that would consider them, approve them if there are any, and recommend it to you. So it still would be the full planning commission.
And I believe that's the correct process. It would need to go through the LDC first and then come forward to your planning commission. And that would be, I amend that to be that number
It's the
in my
time
motion.
planning, it's the planning part of the planning, thinking ahead on an issue that's not burning right now, but will become burning over time.
No, I asked just because that is the correct procedure to do it, because
Mhm.
that ties into the second, and I served as the chairperson of that subcommittee for years. The second thing is with the established priorities for the planning commission, is this going to invade into any of the time on that?
It's, you know, my perspective, I don't have a list of the priorities in front of me, but my perspective is that the situation we've been dealing with, virus especially, we've been dealing with, those priorities we haven't made a lot of movement on that anyway. And my judgment on this one issue is that it seems to be an ideal one to just be an agenda item and what we do annually in the Land Development Council. Might add 2 hours to our time, if no more, and we can get it done and make sure that our rules are in place the right way. So it could have come up through that review, and then we would have gone, it would have delayed by a year, the process of time, but instead it came from you down. But it's exactly the kind of issue that the LDC. So said another way, I don't think it's going to get the right priorities, because it's a relatively short process. It's not the same as you know, what rules do we have to change in case we have to build back after a hurricane, or what rules do we change to get the resort housing so they can redo resort housing where they need to. Those were long, hard processes that we had. This is not like that.
Sure. Couple of questions. Timeframe you think you need to go through as a chair, guess?
Well, I haven't sat down with Keith Williams to figure out the staff side of this.
Correct.
When the staff's ready, we'll get this, we can done this summer. Get it done. It's a meeting of the LDC, it's an agenda item on the planning commission, and it's back to you. So sometime in the fall, you'll either hear from us that no change is necessary, or these are the changes we recommend.
Can I have a follow-up? Thanks. So John, I have a question. I mean, we met with Brent Stokes January, about this. This is how this got to it, with a citizen that's been anxiously waiting, looking for time frame. I just want to make sure we communicate with that customer what our rules, regulations are, time frame. I know that we certainly had a meeting with staff and certainly talked about this at a different timeline than it sounds like we're at right now. So you have a relationship with Brent, you spoke to him, you kind of talked about it. I know he was anxious, and I know the homeowner's been very anxious.
Correct on all accounts, Mayor. I have kept them abreast as we've talked about it, each step of the way, let them know that, that the recommendation from Planning Commission at the last meeting was to ask City Council to broaden that scope and what that would potentially do to the time frame. So they're aware of everything. I've kept them up, and I will continue to keep them up.
Great. I just wanted to do a
As
clarification.
you talk to them, I don't think what I'm suggesting here would be exactly the same timeframe if we had decided we needed to, we're just gonna deal with this one narrow issue. But you'll have to go in and look at the rules,
Correct.
see how the rules have to change, go through a process, come back to you. Probably the same time.
I just want to make sure the contractor, the homeowner, we had a early meeting when he came in somewhat frustrated, the contractor and the homeowner back 6 months ago. So I just want to make sure they communicated with, I was asked to be in that meeting. I didn't look to be in that meeting.
They didn't see it till June.
I absolutely support the council moving forward and providing direction for this. I definitely don't want to do anything that's going to unreasonably elongate that process. Sounds like you've got that under control and have a plan for that.
I have my back to Mr. Williams, so I think he may have a better view on how much control we have on this. But I'll do my best to narrow the scope so that we get this done. So it's not a forever project.
I think it's a wise move, and I applaud your efforts to look at this on a grander scale or a more expansive scale. The one thing that I haven't heard yet, and I'd like for you to consider when working with Mr. Williams and staff, is that we include Department of Natural Resources so we can take a look at what are the natural alternatives.
That was one of the red flags. But when we started here, we heard testimony from someone who has a scientific background that the material being proposed might have environmental problems.
Mhm.
That's when I personally stepped back and said, wait, we can't just run into this because it's dangerous.
One of the things that we know, and you've illustrated this, is that gray structures fail. And what we've seen recently with technology and science is that there are alternatives to gray structures. And I just want to make sure that as a forward-thinking community, we take a look at that. And I think it's the perfect time to do this, and I think we'll come up with a really good decision. So thank you for that.
And Richard, Natural Resources was at the Planning Commission meeting, of course. And, I think it is a great time. It started to be a narrow scope for one contractor, and we really can't make our rules and laws based on one person's need. We've got to look at the broader picture. And I went in with a very narrow focus and came up with a much broader focus. And I really thank Planning Commission for broadening that conversation to where it is right now. Thank you.
Sounds like we're on a good track.
If you want to take this on, which I certainly appreciate, and I think it's interesting, leaving aside that it's an issue apparently now at the moment, I'm fully supportive of that, as long as it does not push the obligations that Planning Commission, especially since we're having trouble getting work done on those. But no, I have no objection to this as the council's desire.
Because, inevitably, whenever we take on a project, we always underestimated the staff time required. We always do that. I mean, that's tradition. So I'm similar concerned that my colleague has. Just what other things are we going to bypass? What other things are we put on the back burner as a consequence of this? Recognizing there's going to be more staff time than you anticipate.
Let me commit something to you and to the council that I haven't taken the time to sit down and with Director Williams and work through the specifics of what are we doing? When we go, that'll be the first step. If we go through that and it becomes apparent that this thing is going to be bigger than we thought, it's going to take more time than we thought, we'll come back. My judgment is we can scope this properly, get done what we need to get done without that happening. But that's just my judgment. That's why I apologize. I haven't taken that step yet.
That judgment I trust.
Could I just make a little twist to this, if I will? And I hear everything you're saying, but if in the event you do that, not to wait a month, would you be so kind to let the liaison know, communicate, she can communicate to this body, so we're not sitting here, we need to recalibrate, you all could do that?
It's part of my position, and I fully anticipated to be sitting with Director Williams and Chair Kedman during the process.
On Zoom, but not in person.
Whatever makes you comfortable.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any public comment? Let's call the question, please. Thanks, Chuck.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ruane?
Yes.
Mr. Denham?
Yes.
Mr. Mon?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last thought. Everybody's got differences of opinions on things. But as a citizen of Sanibel, you guys have done an amazing job the past 4 months. This is harder than after Charlie. Because you have less control now than you had after Charlie. Because you guys have done a great job. You're gonna have differences, but those differences are on the edges. So thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Chair Kedman.
Next item is number 7, which is the first reading, public hearing. City Manager.
Yes, sir. First reading for ordinance 20-001, amending the Sanibel Code of Ordinances, Chapter 70, Utilities, Article 2, Water, Division 3, Conservation, amending Section 7066, Water Shortage Plan, adding water conservation restrictions, providing for codification, providing for conflict, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Second reading will be August 18th at 9:10.
Thank you.
Consent agenda?
Yeah, I'm going to do that right now. Consent agenda, any items council would like to pull on the consent agenda?
I would like to pull item A.
Any other? Go to item A.
Okay, this is for the approval of the minutes, and I would like to pull from the minutes, the May 5th minutes. As you recall, unfortunately, some accusations were brought against me regarding my position as a hotelier. And during that time, the public comment, the attorney did address some of those charges that were made against me, and including but not limited to not allowing me to have everything redacted and not allowing me to speak forward at any time regarding any accommodations discussion. I did read into the record a response to that, and I am requesting that be written into the record, not only on the audio. I think because of the seriousness of that, I believe minutes should reflect really important events, and to me, that was probably a turning point with my tenure here at the city. So I am requesting of council that be my response be written verbatim.
Sounds reasonable.
Is that a motion?
I need a motion.
I would make a motion to accept the wishes of Councilman Smith.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much.
Well, motion second on the floor. Any discussion on council? Seeing none, any public? Let's call the question, please.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ruane?
Yes.
Mr. Denham?
Yes.
Mr. Mon?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other items that wish to be pulled? How about from the audience? Any public want to pull any consent agenda items? Come on. Jill, sorry, didn't notice you.
I recognize anybody when I ask anymore. Good morning.
I'm Jim Warren, former member of the city, and we moved to Sanibel, which we call Sanibel East, and this will be brief. I'm here to hand out pictures of our people and all the traffic on Sanibel.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Gil.
We skip.
This will be brief. years, we've had no traffic signs, stoplights on the city. These traffic control people are absolutely, without any comment, terrific. I'm asking this council to consider having either a promotion outlining our traffic people, or once a year, bringing one of them back as a long-time employee. Thank you.
We could consider that on the budget, but we're just working on consent agenda items now. I'm not gonna have anyone
Oh,
pull.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, no problem.
The point was handsomely made.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Absolutely. I appreciate your comment. Any other items that need to be pulled? City Manager, you want to indulge us with reading some resolutions? Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, just a point of personal privilege, I'd like to make a note regarding item G for everyone listening. This is our multiple year solid waste contract, and I do want to point out there are some new features here that will impact every one of us as homeowners. One is, there's been a long time request to do household hazardous waste collections on island. That's included in this contract. The big change is there'll be, as of October 1st, no more plastic bags for horticulture waste, and there'll be promotion on that. Third, countywide education program for solid waste and recyclables is included in here, and a new provision for contaminated loads going to the landfill. So there'll be a need, you'll be hearing more from us as we go into that contract. But I know we have a lot of people listening currently, and I want to make sure they all realize there are some upgrades coming to us. So with that said, Mayor, I'll do the resolutions.
Thank you very much. Sure.
Resolution F, Resolution 2042, authorizing the city manager to dispose of obsolete or surplus capital assets and providing an effective date. Resolution 2047, adopting a cost allocation plan, also known as an indirect cost plan, for the fiscal year 2020, authorizing the city manager to execute the certificate of cost allocation plan in accordance with the requirements of OMB 2 CFR Part 200 and full cost plan, authorizing the distribution of central service overhead costs to qualifying grants and funds, establishing that regular updates to the cost allocation plan be made, and establishing an effective date.
Do those items.
Second.
Motion second on the floor. Any discussion of council? Seeing none, any public? Seeing none, let's call that question, please.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ruane?
Yes.
Mr. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Thank you.
The remaining consent agenda items are item B, C, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K.
I'll move those items.
Second those.
We have a motion, a second on the floor. Any discussion of council? Seeing none, any public? Seeing none, let's call that question, please.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Ruane?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item is old business water quality. Let's see, Director out of the house.
Yes.
We can move on and he can have a time to come back here.
Yes.
We'll move item number 9. We'll wait for him to come. Let's go to item number 10 if we can. You want to read that resolution for us, City Manager?
Yes, sir. Resolution 2043, appointing a member of the Metropolitan Planning MPO Bicycle Pedestrian Coordinating Committee, the BPCC, and providing an effective date. There were 3 applications received by City Council. And if you're going to do a ballot or a voice vote.
I think you're the,
I'd love a recommendation.
you're the MPO. I follow the executive, but
Yeah,
if you want to make this recommendation.
I don't know. To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I know Sterling former World. The other 2 gentlemen also work. I wonder, do we need to make the appointment today?
No, sir, the vacancy is now, I don't even know if they're currently having in-person meetings. I do not believe so.
We're not.
I would like to delay that until the next meeting so I can.
We can carry that over to the August.
Certainly.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need a motion for that or no?
Do you need a motion, City Manager? Carry that over.
To not appoint, no, with carry it over as that.
Carry it over. Thank you very much.
I apologize, I just don't know, I'm looking at one and I will do it.
And the only other item, then B, just for the record, that council will send we already have sent the official notification to Ms. Cassell for her service to the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Yes, ma'am.
we did not adopt the remaining minutes. If you could go back to that, please.
Oh, I apologize. Item A is still open. We obviously made the corrections, May 5th, May 12th, 21, June 30th, and June 2nd, regular meetings.
I'll move that. on.
And June, did you say June 30th as well? I'm sorry.
Yes, I did.
Second.
Motion second on the floor. Any discussions? Any public comment? Seeing none, let's call that question.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Denham?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Thank you.
We're back to water quality, old business, Director Evans.
Good morning, Mayor, members of City Council. For the record, James Evans, Director of Natural Resources. Give you a quick update on Lake Okeechobee and Coosatchee system. Elevation of Lake Okeechobee as of today is 12.53 feet, and that's up just over a foot since the last City Council meeting on June 2nd. And just as a reminder, we were about 11.47 feet at the last City Council meeting, which is about a month and a half ago. Lake elevation is currently about a foot higher than it was at this time last year, and about almost 2 feet lower than it was at this time in 2018, when we had that horrific year of algae and high flows from the Lake Okeechobee and Coosatchee watershed. Lake's currently near the top of the beneficial use subband of the Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule. And just as a reminder, the beneficial use subband, the Army Corps of Engineers looks to the South Hall Water Management District for recommendations. Since April, the Water Management District has been recommending 650 cubic feet per second to the Coosatchee. So we've been getting the flows we need. There was a dry period where we were starting to see the salinities climb back up, but right now we're in a pretty good spot. Lake Okeechobee inflows and outflows. The inflows to the lake during the past 24 hours, which ended today, were about 3,000 cubic feet per second, and the outflows were negative 413 cubic feet per second. And so what that means is they're backflowing approximately 413 cubic feet per second back into the lake. And that's primarily coming from the L8 and the S308 structures on the East Coast. For the past week, a total of 4,822 acre feet was sent to the Coosatchee through the S77 structure at the Moorhaven Lock. 1,228 acre feet went south through the S352 structure, and approximately 485 acre feet was backflowed into the lake from the south through the S310 structure, and 857 acre feet was backflowed from the L8, and about 868 acre feet was backflowed from the St. Lucie. There's 2 days of missing data, so it's probably a little higher than that 868. But the bottom line is we're seeing the lake starting to come up a little bit, not very quickly because it hasn't been very wet. But that's mainly because we're seeing backflowing back into the lake, and we get about 3,000 cubic feet per second coming into the lake. So flows to the Coosatchee estuary right now during the past week averaged about 797 cubic feet per second. And that's really in our optimal range. We're really looking to have the flows to the Coosatchee somewhere between 750 cubic feet per second and 2,100 cubic feet per second. Flows greater than 2,100 to 2,600 are stressful. Flows greater than 2,600 are actually harmful. And those are the new, what we call the recover targets. That's the evaluation criteria that's used for the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. And those new recover targets were actually adopted on July 7th, and we feel that they're much better than the 2007 recover targets that I think are much more protective of the Coosatchee estuary. So we're pretty happy with those targets. And again, our flows are currently within that optimal range right now, so that's a good thing. About 56% of that flow is coming from Lake Okeechobee, and about 44% of the flow is coming from the watershed. Our ecological conditions, salinities in the upper estuary are currently in the preferred range for tape grass. That's less than 10 practical salinity units. And according to the SCCF Recon Station at Beautiful Island, the salinity is now less than 1 PSU. Again, the goal is to keep the salinity below 10 in Fort Myers, but of course upstream, we want to keep it even lower than that, so we're in a good spot. Salinities in the lower estuary are in the preferred range for oysters, and we're currently ranging between 20 and 33 PSU at Shell Point. Just as a reminder, our preferred range is between 25 and 32, so we're kind of right in that sweet spot. Water clarity in the San Carlos Bay and along Sanibel's beaches remains good. And just give you a quick update on the meteorological conditions. The NOAA Climate Prediction Center 1 month probability outlook, which was made for June 30th, is predicting a 40 to 50% chance of above average rainfall for South Florida. That's typically what we see during the rainy season. The 3 month outlook made June 18th is predicting a 40 to 50% chance of above average rainfall for South Florida. And as far as the El Nino prediction, NOAA's El Nino advisory, which was dated July 13th, indicates that the ENSO neutral conditions are present and that they'll likely be favored through the Northern Hemisphere through the summer of 2020 at about a 50 to 55% chance. So that means that we're not going to see a La Nina or El Nino, or kind of, it's considered ENSO neutral. And that's likely going to continue through the autumn of 2020 with about a 50% chance. So give you a quick update on red drift algae. We did start getting some reports last week of some red drift algae washing up at Bowman's Beach, some small amounts. And then this past week, over the weekend, we started to see some more moderate amounts of the red drift algae showing up between Old Middle Gulf and Lighthouse Beach Park. And we received some photos from the Sanibel PD Beach Patrol. So hopefully that's just related to the wind event that we saw on Friday, which of course had an impact on the shoreline on western Sanibel, just south of Blind Pass. We saw some pretty significant erosion there as well. So we hope that that red drift algae is just an ephemeral event. We'll see. Red tide, FWC is reporting not present to background concentrations. That means that we're seeing 0 to 1,000 cells per liter in all of the samples collected throughout the Gulf of Mexico. So in a pretty good spot there. I do have, if you have any questions about the water conditions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time, Mayor. But I also have 2 updates on the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual and for the C-43 Reservoir feasibility study.
Any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question, but it's a comment. I listened in last week to the board meeting. Thursday, was it? I believe it was Thursday.
The South Florida District Governing Board meeting.
And I was very impressed with that meeting. And the reason that I was impressed is that it is very clear from my observation is the board is very, very, very comfortable in their position. They're beginning to understand what their role in life is, and particularly notable that they are willing to and feel comfortable debating with staff various issues, which I'm beginning to see more and more. But it was very apparent in the last meeting, particularly with those issues with regarding the obstructions of having water flowing south. That was, I think, took up the majority of the board members' comments. And one of the particular things they were focusing on is that the various obstructions to water flowing south, which I thought was an excellent conversation, an excellent discussion, particularly referencing the fact that we shouldn't be concerned about just one protected species, because we have 70 protected species in the Everglades, and being concerned that we shouldn't just focus on one. And so I thought that discussion was very good, and also focusing on the various other obstructions for water flowing south, which I don't recall that the board has ever debated that with staff the way they did. And so I from my colleagues here, I want to report that I'm very comfortable with what the board's doing. I'm very comfortable with the way they handle themselves. I'm very comfortable with the way they're debating those issues which concern us, and that is trying to get more water to flow south. And I did actually write to Chairman Goss and Chauncey and just tell him that I was very impressed by the board, and I think that the way he's handling the board is excellent. So I just thought that was a useful comment, and I think that I personally will continue to sit in on that by video, because I think it's an excellent meeting, and it's really is beginning to fulfill the desires of us and this community of what we think they should be doing. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, and if I could add to that, so I attended the Zoom meeting as well, and the Water Management District Governing Board had a really good discussion, as the Vice Mayor indicated, about the operational constraints of moving water south, and they really were more solution oriented than previous governing board discussions. They were really looking at where we can make some tweaks and how how the Seaside Sparrow and the S12 structures limited our ability to move water south. But I thought there was a really good discussion about the need to get the central portion of the system completed, all those projects so that we can store and treat that water before we move it south. While the Seaside Sparrow did limit the ability to move some of the water south, it wasn't the primary constraint. It's really getting those projects done and being able to store and move that water south. But looking at solutions rather than just looking at obstructions, I thought it was a really good discussion. And in the systems report, one of the biologists, Lawrence Glenn, gave a really good update on the conditions in Lake Okeechobee and the estuaries. And one thing I think is important for council to know, and I've sent the reports forward to the city manager regarding the harmful algal blooms, the microcystis blooms in Lake Okeechobee. And at one point they were up to 75% bloom potential, which means that about 75% of the lake had the potential for an algae bloom. And that has now come down to about 40%. But a couple weeks ago, the Water Management District staff went out and did some testing of the microcystis to look at microcystins, which is the toxin that's produced by microcystis. And they found that in those samples, they found levels of about 800, which the World Health Organization is about 8. So to put that in perspective, the amount of toxin, the microcystin toxin that was being produced in the lake was pretty significant. So that has dropped now. Those samples are way down. It's a very, it can be very ephemeral. It can change very quickly. And that's why, tracking toxins is difficult. It can be here today, gone tomorrow. So anyway, the lake seems to be improving as far as the toxins, but the potential for those algal blooms is there because of the water temperature and the nutrients in the lake. So, and they did some correlation analysis, and they did see that the nutrient loading into the lake, primarily nitrogen, was having an effect on that bloom potential and the production of the microcystin in those samples. So that's somewhat new information. And then of course the board also approved a study to look at the sediments within Lake Okeechobee, to look at the nutrients and sediment and how those sediments are resuspended from wind events and discharges to the estuaries. So anyway, I thought it was an excellent meeting. If you want to go back and listen to that, I think it's very helpful.
All right, Mike,
Absolutely.
I also thought that Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds' presentation was excellent. And excellent from an educational viewpoint. There are a lot of people that don't understand how it all fits together. I wonder if we could get a copy. There was a PowerPoint. I don't know how many slides. I can't remember. Half a dozen maybe. It would be good if we could get a copy of that presentation and have each council member seen it. Because I thought it was very educational, and I thought it was very good the way she put it together and how it all showed you how it all fit. So I could do that. So in addition to that, I think it might be useful if I could recommend, Mr. Mayor, that at meetings following a board meeting, I think it might be appropriate just to give a thumbnail overview of what went on, because I think it is very appropriate of what we're concerned about and what we're doing. And I think as part of our agenda, I don't think would not take too much time to spend a few minutes just discussing the key issues and the key points which would impact us and their environment and so on. I think that would be appropriate. We included that in future agendas as a suggestion.
That's reasonable. Somebody have a comment on that?
Nope.
James, I saw something in the paper regarding Senate Bill 712. And I believe it was in the paper a couple of days ago, actually Monday the 13th, in regards to the groups criticizing the new water bill. When I read through that, I summarized it saying, some people want everything, but we need to make sure that we're moving forward, getting pieces of it. And I would just like you to discuss that a little bit, because I feel like we're moving forward and we can't take the step back to say, unless we have the whole piece, we don't want to see anything go forward, because I think it does have some very good language in it moving forward. So if you could give a little bit of a review of our conversation, I appreciate your time.
Sure. So Senate Bill 712 was a pretty comprehensive water bill that was adopted in this legislative session and just recently signed by the governor. And so what it does is it really it takes some of the recommendations from the Blue-Green Algae Task Force and incorporates that into the bill. It really tightens up some regulations on on-site septic system, on-site wastewater treatment systems, which are septic systems. It turns the control and management regulation of the septic systems from the Department of Health over to the Department of Environmental Protection. It also has some language in there that requires additional evaluation and demonstration of how agricultural BMPs are being done. Although it wasn't as strong as I would have liked to have seen, it did add some additional oversight and some additional monitoring. But I think the bill certainly is open to some criticism. It didn't go as far as many would have liked it to have gone as far as water quality. But the one component of the bill that I really like is that it allows for rulemaking of updating the stormwater rules, which I think was a priority for the city of Sanibel and the city council. And that language is in the bill, and I think it's going to be as good as we can make it. We're going to have to be involved and participate in the rulemaking process to make sure that we get everything we want out of it. It's much heavier, I would say, on managing of urban stormwater and things like that. The SB 712 than it is on agriculture, and I think that's where some of the environmental advocates and organizations are very concerned that it didn't go far enough. There's been some concern that it's actually more harmful than helpful, and I would disagree with that. I think the Conservancy of Southwest Florida had a really good statement that this is a starting point, a building block. We're very happy that the governor and the legislature moved forward with this year. But again, it's not the end-all be-all. It's just a starting point where we can continue to build to improve water quality and collect more information. But I think by having the ability to adopt new stormwater regulations and improve on the past stormwater regulations, it's definitely a step forward.
Thank you.
So Mayor, I just have two quick updates. I wanted to give you an update on the C43 Reservoir Water Quality Treatment Component Feasibility Study Update, long name, but important project. And the working group is working on finalizing the first draft of the feasibility study this week. I sent a press release or a meeting alert to the city manager this morning. And our next public meeting for the working group and a public meeting will be this Thursday, July 16th at 2 p.m. The meeting will run from 2 to 4 p.m. and it will be a Zoom meeting and can be accessed through the district's website. And I sent that information on to the council members. And the first draft of the feasibility study was sent to all of us working group members. We're reviewing it now and our comments are due this Thursday. So all of that data that was incorporated into the feasibility study will be presented at this public meeting. So if you're interested in that project, I would encourage you to attend. And just for the public, what the feasibility study will do or is doing is looking at a water quality treatment component for the C43 reservoir, which was one of the city council's top priorities, both legislatively and also locally within the watershed. It's something that we really thought needed to happen in order to make the water that comes out of the C43 reservoir that'll be stored to help us meet our minimum flows is clean enough so that it doesn't contribute to harmful algal blooms and other impacts to the estuary. And so we narrowed it down, the working group narrowed it down to 10 different alternatives, and now we've taken another step and we're down to about 3 recommended alternatives. The feasibility is really focused on cost benefit of those different alternatives. So, we're pretty excited that it's moving forward. That project will be completed in November. It was a 17-month process from beginning to end. And of course,
So what the decision on which direction?
Sorry, Vice Mayor.
In the 17 months, what will we complete?
So we'll have the feasibility study, which will make a recommendation on what project to pursue. It'll be narrowed down to 3 technologies, which of course will be taken to the next step. But the idea is to look at the feasibility of these various technologies to see what will be appropriate from a cost benefit standpoint to be utilized in the treatment technology for the C43 reservoir. So it's a feasibility study.
It's going to take another 17 months.
No, it was a 17-month process, which will be completed in November of this year.
Right.
Yes. So we've been working on it for some time. And then the other update, I want to give you a quick update on the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, which is the new Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule. The project's currently in the plan formulation stage, and that's where we're finalizing the performance measures for the different parts of the system. For example, the salinity targets and flow targets for the Caloosahatchee or the St. Lucie, or for this stormwater treatment areas or water supply performance measures. All of that's being finalized right now. And we're incorporating that into the different screening tools, and those performance measures will be measured through a number of different modeling runs to screen out what alternatives will be the best, so that in the end, we'll have what's called a tentatively selected plan. And the Corps anticipates that by this time next year, we should have a tentatively selected plan. And working with our partners on the project delivery team, which I'm a member of, our partners at Cape Coral and Lee County, we've all been working together with our consultants to provide technical comments and input along the process to make sure that it's equitable for the Caloosahatchee estuary. So far so good. They've been incorporating all of our comments and recommendations. We had to submit multiple letters on the same issue a couple times to get them to incorporate it, but we're getting there. So we're happy to see that the process is based on science at this time and not politics. So hopefully it'll continue down that road. And we do have our next PDT meeting. The project delivery team meeting is on July 30th. So that is open to the public. Public can provide comments along with the PDT. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Mayor, if I could, James, I'd like to reach out. It's clearly evident from comments here on the dais, the tough work that's been going on and the advances that we've made with a scientific-based approach to water quality. I'd also like to reach out to you personally and say thank you for the work that you're continuing to do while we're all busy focusing on COVID-19 and the challenges that are presented us there. It's obvious that you have stayed the course and made sure that we continue with the good work that's going on. And while we may not get every single thing that we want, I think you are making sure that we're getting everything that we need for our environment here in the city of Sanibel and Southwest Florida. So thank you for that.
And I'd echo that. Very well said. I was glad to see this presentation again. To take a look at it, I did reach out to Dr. Savarese. It's been a while since we've had the opportunity to chat, and I've asked to get together just to refresh, because it has been a while. And thank you for keeping your finger on everything and making sure that our city work keeps going in the direction that we need to for our natural resources. So thank you, James.
I believe that's it, Mayor. We did have the letter of support for the University of Florida and Florida Gulf Coast University modeling effort. That's going to be a regional effort to get some funding from the Department of Economic Opportunity, so that the local governments don't have to pick up the bill for doing that modeling. And I think what it allows us to do is look at it more regionally or even statewide for the impacts of sea level rise and climate change on our local communities here. As a barrier island, that's important for our community. It's even more important that our community doesn't have to pick up the bill, and that we can get some help from the Department of Economic Opportunity. So we felt that was an easy one to support. So thank you for the consideration of the letter of support.
Great letter.
Thank you, James. That concludes item number 10. Item number 11 is discussion of the budget. Steve.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council, Steve Chapel, Finance Director. So the draft budget has been developed. Staff's been working on this for the last 2 months in a rather challenging and evolving environment. I believe that we've captured kind of the overall theme of the budget, if you will, and the budget message that's beginning on page 4. Just a couple of highlights I wanted to point out that's in the budget. So first of all, the property appraiser did appraise Sanibel's property values preliminarily as of July 1st, which is what we use to set the tax rate. Sanibel hit another high of just a hair over $5.4 billion in taxable value, which will be used for the millage rate. The budget as presented in the draft, is set at the same millage rate that was adopted last year, operating wise, which is a 1.8922 rate. Combine that with the 3 voted debt service tax rates, it presents a total budget, a total tax rate, excuse me, of 2.1818 mils. That is the lowest overall tax rate that the city has levied in since 2007. So it's a little over 24% decrease in the total tax rate that we've seen in the budget. The COVID-19 pandemic obviously is a very recurring theme throughout the budget. Again, in the budget message, I want to describe some of the current issues that we faced. As everybody knows, the council has addressed initially the economic concerns related to the pandemic. In April, we had a special council meeting shortly thereafter, reduced the budget by about $3.5 million for this year that we're sitting in fiscal year 20. That factors very heavily into the 21 budget. The ending results from fiscal year 20 is our starting point, and has been discussed a lot at council. Our beginning funds that we use in any given year are a significant portion of the funding that we use to fund that year. By Florida law, we are required to pass a balanced budget. All beginning funds and new funds coming in that year are to be counted as a budget. So the budget is balanced as required. The beginning fund balance, based on where we're estimating right now fiscal year 20 to be, is in line with what we have seen in the past. So I'm certainly available to ask or answer any questions.
Steve, several, if you will. You're looking for direction, right? I mean, I know we got to pay as a millage rate, but giving you direction to come back with a tentative budget is going to make your job a lot easier.
Absolutely. So what we're looking for after the meeting today, obviously what's required today is to set a preliminary millage rate. But yes, any kind of direction that we could be given to, the next version of the budget is the tentative budget that will be presented at the first budget hearing in September. So certainly operating in this environment, we're going to see a lot of changes coming up in the next couple of months. The state of Florida updated yesterday that their estimates for the revenue that they expect to share with municipalities has been delayed a little bit until they kind of work on finalizing their estimates. So we really won't get, we're hopeful that we get some of those estimates next week, towards the end of next week. So certainly there are going to be some significant changes between the draft and the tentative budget.
Start from the top if you can. The increase that we received in property values, approximately 2.65, just for council's allocation, brings about $240,000 in.
Correct, at the same tax rate as last year.
Okay. So basically, when we look at additional revenue, if you will, that's what we start with. Health insurance, the FMIT leveraged 8% was their recommendation. I believe ours was 3%, along with long-term care insurance is whatever, it's about $50K.
Correct.
So, just simple math, I mean, that leaves us with $190,000 when we pay for those benefits, and obviously it'll be something we'll need to describe. I know there's a lot of moving targets, but just for edification, since maybe the public and whatever, I think it's miraculous that we looked at the revised budget that we did in April, and what most people don't realize is the beginning fund balances are essential to making this budget. It ends up to be about 37% of our budget, and based on the adjustments we made, the adjustments that we did, tried to have it come in around that 37%, and I'm happy to say the budget we have in front of us is actually 38%. So it exceeded what we thought, so kudos. But let's get down some of the revenue streams that obviously going to be impacted as a result of COVID, because it certainly are moving items. And, when I put together the revised budget that I presented to council, there were many things I couldn't forecast, and many things you highlighted. but just for council's edification, where they flow through the budget. Again, just trying to make sure everyone understands. So state half sales tax, that obviously is an item that flows to the general. It's obviously trending down. We probably were more on the high side of 55K to about 35K now. That obviously is a direct correlation between people spending money. Sales tax, obviously, as COVID hits this environment, obviously people spend less money, less sales tax comes in the door. That ultimately, if that fluctuation comes, that'll ultimately pan out in the unappropriated reserves. That's where it'll ultimately have the impact.
Correct.
So ultimately, all our revenue, when we allocate it, if there's fluctuations, what is an item that is in constant change or pressure is the unappropriated reserves. And unappropriated reserves are reserves that we have that are not appropriated, that we have the flexibility to utilize in any way, shape, or form. State revenue sharing, again, goes through the general fund. That's obviously been trending down as well. It's about 12K a month.
Correct. Which is down about 50%.
Correct, sorry. Gas tax is probably the only tax there that actually goes through the transportation fund, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and obviously that's a direct correlation, in need to use it for that, and obviously price gaps and variances in the consumer not having the ability to spend money, that's gonna have an impact. That's trending down as well?
That is trending down. We haven't seen that yet, but certainly we've been notified, and that's one of the estimates that the state is prepared to publish, hopefully by the end of this week, and we'll have that next week.
The next big item, obviously, is the TDC. I was at the beach and shoreline, and there's been a memo that's sent out. There were over $15.5 million worth of projects. There's only about $9 million that's going to be allocated. The memo, at least before we've had any opportunity to weigh in, indicates that they're not going to utilize reserves to try to make the shortfall. That's an essential piece of our budget. Obviously, beach maintenance that we need to take care of is essential. When we don't receive enough money, obviously, the augmentation needs to be from the general fund.
Yeah, so currently in the budget, and the TDC funds flow into the beach parking budget, we have all the expenses that we asked for at this point reflected in the budget, but that revenue is not, as we've done for years. Until the contracts are actually approved and executed, they're not included in the budget.
The revised budget that we did in the presentation to get to the appropriate numbers certainly had a number anticipated from the TDC at 1,750. So again, that's going to be a dicey situation, and certainly going to need to make sure we receive that, because the beach is public and obviously a requirement for us to maintain. That's essential to making the numbers work as close as they do. That would have a severe impact if we didn't. And I don't know what the commission or that body is going to do to make up approximately a $6 million shortfall in revenue. Alcohol beverage, again, going to flow through and to the general fund.
Correct.
Okay. Motor fuel goes to, does that end up in the general? Does that go to transportation?
Transportation, sir.
Okay.
And it's a relatively small part of the intergovernmental that's in transportation.
All the appropriate changes were made, and they're highlighted in the budget message, in the budget document that we have as a draft. And there's a number of items that we decreased in many situations. So you go to initiatives and requests that aren't funded in the budget. COVID unfortunately has impacted our lives in so many aspects, but the financial aspect is more than noticeable. And we deferred an awful lot of projects to make this work for a 2-year period of time. Just trying to educate the citizens who have a desire to see us move forward with initiatives. There's different initiatives from different emails that have come in. And one of them was common emails, and not indicating there's a lot of them, but certainly the most common one is the Iguana program that we removed from this. I did have an opportunity to speak to Ryan Ojera over the weekend, Saturday. We talked about somehow working some opportunity, maybe of course sharing that. He would be very much in favor of seeing us move forward with that, but there's a list of items that I think what we need to do is give Steve an indication of some type of direction on what the tentative budget looks like as we start to adjust. I don't know if there's any projects that, based on the emails that came in, if there's any projects that anyone feels the strong desire to discuss.
Yeah, I understand clearly the tightness of the budget, and I understand that we are making changes to our debt to accommodate certain projects. The project which that I think is something we should at least make an initial step forward on, and that's on the police headquarters and the police modernisation of their facility. I think from a morale viewpoint and from a desire viewpoint, I think that's a very important thing for us to move forward with. And I think it would be helpful, I think, if we could at least make an initial step forward on that project. I don't believe it's in the budget. I think if I had to stack up priorities, it would be very high on my priority list of things we need to do. And so I would like some thoughts, some consideration of that as we move forward, whether that's taking out some additional debt above what we've already anticipated, I'm not sure, but it is a project which I think, for me, I believe is very important. I think it's very important for the morale of our police force. I think it's very much important because of the way the lives of our police officers are changing in terms of storage and facilities, and the fact that the facilities they currently have is really not appropriate for the modern day policing. I just think it's something we should have some further discussion on, or some consideration for, even though we have a very tight budget. And I would wonder if, as our debt is being well controlled, and our debt is less than it was certainly when I started on council, I wonder if we could consider possibly some additional debt financing, but at least to move forward on that project. That's the only thing that I have to comment on projects. Thank you.
Part of the agenda of discussions under budget, so update on police department renovations. So, it's more than appropriate to have this is a discussion given certainly Steve direction on what our desires and or.
No, I think ultimately the question to me was, is there any projects within this budget? And I just thought that as a project, which
Absolutely. I was just making a comment that's part of the discussion. Sure. It's direction we need to take.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may. Just a comment, the lizard control program, I think, is one that's important, as well as the police department. And I think we'll have some additional discussion there. And I'd like to see that. I think, Mayor, you're right. That's probably the lizard control was one that I've heard a great deal from residents as well. My question is that if we look at the projects that are not funded in the budget, is there anything in there, and I've walked my way through them, is there anything in there that we feel that is critically important to the health and safety and well-being of our community? Or are all of these things we made good decisions to pull these back from the budget so we could make it through to this point? As I'm looking at it, there's some that might be, but I'd look for, Steve, your comments and others, if there's anything that we have not identified as critically important that really needs to be put back into this budget.
Sure.
Right now, what is in that schedule that's included as the initiatives not budgeted is what the directors have identified as projects that they would have otherwise budgeted. To my knowledge, nothing that directly affects health and safety has been excluded. Certainly, we are funding different areas. For example, police department, those kind of things are still funded to an operating level that would be able to deliver the services. So that's right now what we have.
Okay. City manager, are you comfortable with where we are on these?
I don't know if comfortable is the right word.
I'm sorry, that didn't jump the spot.
I mean, we've said it many times since we entered this pandemic here in this room, and again, I know many people are listening. The level of service that we have always tried to provide our community our goal has always been to provide the highest quality of service in the most efficient manner at the lowest cost dollar we could, and to bring all of those factors to bear. And one of the things we do know is even though these last several months we've made some major constriction in service, we've not always seen the same constriction among the demands from the community for the level of services. We have used, among the staff over the years, we've tried to provide what we call a concierge level service for our residents. And with the less staff and the less dollars and the less project, I do not anticipate, and I know council has made it clear, we will not be providing that level of service. I do believe there's still a gap in the public recognizing the level of service that we will be able to provide with both the staff we have, the dollars we have, and the projects we will be providing. We do have, when you ask specifically about life safety issues, and we've really prioritized, obviously, those employees that provide life-saving responses, be them in the police department, code enforcement, et cetera. But we also have made a conscientious effort to keep some funds available for emergency repairs, for example, to the shared use paths, et cetera. And that's an area that, we have built this tremendous infrastructure, but there's going to be less routine maintenance there. So we know the need to get out to hotspots and the need to quickly respond to any kind of defects in pavement, et cetera, is going to be very important because our risk is great out there when we have a litigation in those areas. So it's going to be I believe the next 24 months will be an uncomfortable budget, but a necessary budget. I don't think the word comfortable has been bandied around City Hall much lately.
And thank you for those comments, and that's exactly what I wanted to get to is that the expectations of the past are not necessarily going to be fulfilled in the next 24 months. And pardon me for throwing the word comfortable at you when we started, but I think it's important that all of our citizens understand that we're going to do the absolute level best that we can do with what we have to work with, and it is going to be a challenge.
Sure.
Thank you. I look at when we say what's in the budget or what isn't in the budget. When I look at a line item, and yes, we have had quite a bit of conversation about iguanas. It's clear on the island that we've got an issue. So when I look at a $40,000, $38,000, but you have $40,000 in the budget line item that's been canceled. We just had discussion a couple of weeks ago regarding the rec center, that we could find that we felt that was important. So I think there's the ability to do that. And of course, we can always go back and say, as we look through our consent agenda and we're asking for all these newly funded items when it says this does not increase the budget. Well, that money came from somewhere. So we might have that opportunity again, or we might have to increase the budget. I mean, we haven't seen that previously, but that might be a direction. These are just unbelievably difficult times. So if we're tight as we have to be, but then there might have to be an opportunity next year that we have to say this will increase the budget because it's that important at the time. But if I don't want to compare an iguana program with a $3.7 million, addition to the police, that's a huge difference in looking at what the costs are. I certainly think that, we do know that the services that our citizens we've all had the opportunity for is going to be tightened. We also have to, I really appreciate everything that every director has done because they've had to really go in and say, what are our wants versus our needs? And I think we have to do that at every level. And we've just taken on quite a bit of debt. For the senior center, we've taken on the additional debt for the sewer plant, and, maybe there's more cost-efficient ways that we can do the senior center. In fairness, I received this budget last Thursday. I had a briefing with Steve, and I appreciate the time, but I can be honest with you and say from Thursday to today, I don't know how much I can honestly add to this, because I've got to look at this. So I think this is great conversation, but I think it's going to continue as I learn to understand it more and more. Richard, you and I are going to be tasked to understanding it at a deeper level. So I really appreciate all the cuts that have been done and all the sacrifices that are being made, and I think more will have to be made. And then, Mick, in answer to, what you're looking at with the police, and just looking at these numbers, or seeing what the next step might be, that's a great conversation. I'm concerned about the next 24 months as well, as I think we all are in every line of business.
Appreciate the comments. All I was trying to do, recognize that I'm leaving here, is to try to make things a little bit easier for the remaining council members, having sat up here for 14 budgets. And just the flow of money, and maybe to simplify this, that you want to get into the detail, is this: the reason I identified the revenues that are in flux is they flow to the unappropriated reserves, which we ended last year's budget with about $835,000, and right now, based on our estimates, it'll be increased by $775,000. So that's kind of the pool of money when you think about where the fluctuations can be, where the changes can be, and when revenues are impacted, the revenues are going to flow directly to that. So right now on this, it's not uncommon when we get to the tentative that the draft and the tentative might have a slippage in unappropriated reserves, which really is the amount of money you have bearing any tax increases or anything of that nature to really work with. Debt, as the Vice Mayor said, and certainly Councilman Smith, is really a debt underneath a millage rate that we prescribe and adopt. So as much as a conversation needs to take place about issues, the basic conversations of, having reduced staff on the legislative side by 3 people. And now the demands are coming in, and it's just Anna and Pamela. So there are things that we look at, and the emails continue to come in, and the phone calls continue to come in, and where there's opportunities, those might be considerations that we have to think about. I agree with the Iguana program. One of the things that we've done in the past, if we want to consider something, is considering some type of initial design, if that's a desire to know what the costs are. We've got a cost estimate in the back, are quick and dirty, but I think until you really get into design and truly spend some dollars, unfortunately, you really won't know those costs. And maybe it's premature at the moment. Let's look at the August budget. We can certainly deal with it. As some of these revenue items tighten up, they'll have a better adjustment, but I'm going to predict that 775, that's the difference between last year's unappropriated reserves and this year's, will certainly decrease. So then the pot of money that we have, and then other actions that we need to take to continue to protect the citizenry, obviously filter out and reduce that. I think it's going to be a tough adjustment regardless of what we need to do. And I think the citizenry need to understand the priorities we're going to put in place first and foremost, and then try to provide the services. Again, the philosophy when I walked in the last recession was, my philosophy was kind of simple: tax your way out of a recession. I think that we're going to have tremendous challenges, and I would prescribe and certainly endorse having a larger amount in unappropriated reserves, because by statute, we're only allowed to reserve 5% for bad debt for property taxes. There were certainly concerns back in 2008 that we would exceed that number. We never did. I have greater concerns today than I did then. As our commercial sector, because we're made up of, in a very unusual way, the taxes that come in here, and the commercial sector, the motels, the condos are a big part of the tax piece. And I think they're going to be under tremendous pressure, and it wouldn't surprise me if some of them have issues and might impact, and that might number for collectible general obligation taxes for the general fund might be greater than 5%. And then that's going to flow to unappropriated. So I think that's just a number, not to get into the details, and I respect the fact that we got this, but just from a highlight point of view, if there's any particular programs, as Steve will make adjustments to the budget relative to revenue adjustments, whatever are the priorities that we have, that, you know, to give him some type of direction as we come in with the tentative. We're going to go to tentative in October, in August, and then we're going to final in September. So it moves quickly. So if there's anything that we all can agree upon, and I do agree with the vice mayor, I just want to keep the items in the appropriate areas, and that's why when you say where the funds are going to come from or the department that's impacted, you need to look at, you know, whether it's general transportation, transportation capital, beach parking. And I believe the transportation and transportation capital are, in the most simplistic way, projects that we're going to defer. And I think deferring capital projects has some long-term consequences, but in the short-term environment, they're the greatest items to defer to give us the greatest flexibility. And when you look at the dollars associated with transportation capital, you know, you start to blink and you get to $2 million of the $2.6 million that are requested. So I think it's safe to say that we're not in a position, and I think we all agree, the transportation capital. So if you eliminate the initiatives that are very easy to say, we can't do that, then the list becomes shorter, smaller, and I think it's more compact to have that type of discussion. And that's kind of what I was trying to drive out today, is to see if there was even an item or two that we come across an iguana situation. And, you know, we did have a robust conversation about the recreation center and finding the money from that. There's many things you do in forecasting and many things we do to make the recommendations we do. The rec center has probably been in opening up, and the programs we have right now have missed revenues by a mile. So it's going to have some effects to this budget, because that's a program, you know, we had a thought based on the emails that there was more of a demand. And without the demand, and when you're receiving a couple $1,000s for the week and you projected 40, it starts to add up rather quickly. So I do believe that'll also, and that's probably the biggest item that has been not necessarily performing the way the other revenue streams that we have in here. And that's had the greatest strain on the budget, to say the least. So that was just from a simplification point of view.
Mayor, I think, I'm comfortably uncomfortable with the budget. And I think if people need to remember here that what we're faced with today is hoping for the best, but planning for the worst. As long as we can try and cover the worst case scenarios and predict as best we can the future for the citizens and staff, and what we need to provide for that. I join with Councilman Denham. One of the things we've pushed for years, and the rest of the council, is that there needed to be modernizations of police facilities to address the increased number of female police officers. I don't like to use, in government, I don't like to use the term fair. That's what you pay on a bus, not what you get out of life. But this is an issue where it's not fair, the setup and morale is, and I don't think that, they're far too strong to be, let that put them down, but I think we owe it to them. And I'm not saying, I'm most assuredly not in favor of additional debt. We took a lot of things on in good faith for good reasons, which are going to give the citizens and the city good results. But I certainly think at a minimum, we should be looking at a way to advance the program. What steps can we take? If we can't build it next year, what can we do to make it faster to build the year after? Right. I've found in life that as long as you keep marching towards a goal every day, sooner or later, time will let you get there. And that's what I want to make sure that we do make at a minimum, is to, if we can't pay for it now, or compromise, have a plan, be it designs, be it feasibility, be it whatever, be investigating other methods of funding this from outside sources, et cetera, but that we are moving forward. But apart from that, in the current nightmare scenario we find ourselves, the prospect of a low tax rate is extraordinary planning, and it's grim decision making that has to be made. I think we need to see it as just that. Things could be a lot worse. I think people are getting value for their tax dollar. I don't think we can do much more. And to be able to say that with an extraordinary straight face in a fiscal and societal crisis time is cause for joy, but at least some satisfaction to what we're accomplishing here today. Even if some people, if there's a haircut to some programs, that's God's teeth. We call that haircuts to all sorts of things, and with the way stuff is going. So I'm very pleased with what's been proposed, and I look forward to seeing the final.
And Mike, your comments on the police align exactly with what my thoughts are. We need to make a step forward. We need, whether that's design and architectural or something, just to begin to get this process moving forward, because I agree exactly with what I thought entirely. If we could find a way to move forward on that, to a limited degree, I would like to try and find a way to do that.
I would also support getting through the present and planning for the future. And it is gonna take a very long time to figure out exactly what we need to do, what there may be some intermediate steps that can be taken relatively easily that we should do, but then getting a good plan for when we get to a point where we can take that major step, we need to be ready to do that. And so I would support that as well.
And I think when we're also looking at, at the tax income that we get, we have to remember that we still have an average value here much higher than most areas. And many areas we're still recovering from years of being in the negatives or 60% down. So we've been fortunate to be a little bit more stable, and I hope next year, we're in the same position, because we could be in a better position than some of the communities around us because of being on Sanibel and what we are here in Sanibel and the expectations that people have and that they live in. So, when we look at that small percentage increase, I also look at the other communities. Their percentage increase is different based on their values. So we need to always keep that in mind as well.
My analogy has always been we're a blue chip stock. We didn't go down. There's Cape Coral, Fort Myers Beach, Bonita are still not got the par from the downturn. We're above par. But along the lines of both what Jason and Mick said, I think, I also remind myself when I came on this council of having $100 million worth of debt. And, before we took on the debt for the donors plans, which I think is probably the most ingenious things we did, we got down to about $18 million. So I don't deflect the fact that we spent $15 million in debt to bring us back up to, but we all are paying off around $4 million. So, at the end of the day, it's still going to be a number that's going to be lower than $30 million. The good news with it is threefold. One, it's at historical lows. Two, it's currently the millage rate that's actually prescribed to do that will give the council in the future some flexibility, because that will decrease. So the blended rate or the millage rate can certainly have some opportunity for some flexibility, because that will certainly give you that flexibility. Even if you would put the police into this, you're still going to have a lower debt rate that you blend in with the current millage rate or the millage rate necessary for the basic budget. Then you add the millage rate for the debt service, and those two combined is what Steve referred to earlier. So you will have some flexibility. I'm probably of the opinion to have a firmer number with the police department, and I'm probably of the mindset that we do have some $15 million that we've allocated. 10 really spoken perfect, 5 is an unknown, other than we needed 2 to buy the library, which we're in. Either way, I think there's an opportunity to perhaps look at this and perhaps even have a discussion about using, some of the remaining $3 million as looking at design to see what that number might look like. There's also going to be some opportunities if you'd like to amend or add on to the $15 million if that's the choice. And I don't know that you're going to find a lower interest rate ever. And I think you could blend that in. These are capital improvement, 30, 40-year projects that don't come around often, but this project will certainly have the benefit for certainly my lifetime and certainly people that will precede me. But it's something that I think makes a lot of sense, and I think we can do it in a way that does not have any pressure to the taxpayer, does not have any pressure to the budget, and still take advantage of historically lows. Having, sitting on the loan council, there's many communities right now that have borrowed money and then they do an addendum or they add on to that request. So it's just something that you'll have the flexibility of doing. Generally, there's a 12-month provision in the notes where you will be able to go back and adjust that and add on if that's what you choose to do. I won't be here, obviously, but it's just the flexibility. Why we went to a note as opposed to a bond was for that very reason, to give you the flexibility, to give the option to pay the debt out if you want, to give you just tools that we learned from the past. When I got up here, we did more bonds, and bonds have prepayment penalties and they have a lot of restrictions where notes give you just greater flexibility. But in settlement with both Councilman Mon and Denham and what I've heard across the dais, I certainly believe that the police renovations is something that we should, talk about it and maybe some more depth, and maybe come the August tentative, we see what appropriated, unappropriated reserves look like as we start to tighten this up, and we might have an opportunity to see, is there an opportunity to take some money from the general, or, do we need to perhaps utilize some funds that we've allocated to the renovation of the senior center, and do that. So there's flexibility, and I think flexibility provides a necessary ingredient right now as we're going through some of the most challenging times.
When we're looking at both the police and also I think we can say the same for the senior center. I mean, we really don't have too much in the design or understanding there as well. So we've got these funds available, and I think if we're going to be doing that with the police, I think that at the same time we should have some sort of a better number maybe moving forward for the senior center as we're looking to those renovations, to just see where we're at. I mean, I think we're going to need both areas, because I don't believe that we have really firm numbers yet on the senior center as well, do we?
Not firm numbers, but that is certainly project is in front of the police and certainly working towards that.
Status, of course, we were hoping to have all of that ready for budget, but because of COVID assignments, some of that has been delayed due to the amount of staff we have to work on it. Where council is with the Center for Life is we do have a conceptual design, which puts us one step ahead of where we would be on the modernization of the police department. So you may recall council approved a conceptual design. The next step is to select an architect, which we looked at any way to piggyback on architects. We're not going to be able to do that. So for the Center for Life, we'd have to go out for the competitive architect process. And so where that takes staff time is developing that scope of services, evaluating the architects, etc. And then after you have that, you would do a takeoff for a firmer estimate. I mean, we could do a square foot takeoff right now, but that would be we always know there's the Sanibel factor, and it's a rather unique building. So, it would be a very rough estimate.
No, certainly I understand my background and the very little background that I have, but I just think the more that we know, the better we're going to be able to make decisions on whether we need additional funding. And it seems like a great time for us as we're moving forward on these items to be able to look at both of them at the same time. I think that would be worthy.
City Manager, is there any thought that we might have I know we're at the conceptual plan, but by adoption of the budget, is there any thought that we can have the ability to look at something firmer?
It would be,
And again, I'm not trying.
it would be
yes
an
or no is
in-house
correct, I know.
estimate, but
Then no.
having an architect on board and prepare an estimate, no, we would not be at that point, sir. And I've just confirmed with Director Williams.
And I think it makes prudent sense to look at this in August as things tighten, as we have what reserves. I think we move towards that, but it sounds like we wouldn't have anything other than a conceptual plan for this adopted budget. And where that's more advanced than the police is we don't have even a conceptual.
Correct.
And maybe what we might want to consider is trying to get a conceptual so we can look at that. And that's where I think the discussion, at least the conversations I had with Director Chapel and putting this on the agenda was to try to get to the point where they're both at conceptual. We could look and at least start to make some recommendations to staff.
So 2 steps have been completed with Center for Life and have come to council previously. Need study, conceptual design. Police department completed the need study. Next step would be conceptual design. And then from there you go to architectural designs, bidding, construction.
Thank you.
So we will be able, you think that we will be able to look at a conceptual design for the police department for the August budget? Is that what I heard?
No, sir.
No.
No,
We have to give them the
No,
right
sir.
to do so.
Yesterday we gave you the estimate from the architect for them. What they just have completed is the need study.
Okay.
So what we sent you, so you have not had an opportunity to review the results of the need study, but the basic bottom line is that they believe they can renovate here on site with some additional square footage to meet the long-term needs of the department. And they gave us the cost of a very preliminary estimate that I sent you last night on that.
Right, I saw that last night, yeah.
What I was advocating is to put them on the same parallel path to get to a conceptual design. And that's what
I was trying to get to.
That's what I was trying to have council, so as Councilwoman Smith said, have them both at the same stage. One is ahead of the other at the moment. So just to look at those, I think conceptual plans are needed for the police, and that certainly would be my 2 cents and recommendation.
No wishing to sound like a broken record, but I'm just wondering if we are willing and have the stomach for considering some additional debt so that we can accommodate doing some of this. If we can add on. I think what we want, I'm assuming you say is that we do have the option to take some additional debt or add on to the debt that we got to be able to accommodate some of the 2 critical projects we got, i.e. the police and.
Interesting enough, Mick, we paid off $3.9 million this year. This is 3.7. So by the time the fiscal year is over, we paid off more than we would have put on. So if there's ever an opportunity, again, there's people that are going to be here long after me. There's ever an opportunity, I just think the ingredients are best to do that now, at least and that's really what I was advocating, to indicate that there's that much debt coming off. So the city's not putting more debt on, paid off. So it 3.7, 3.9, it kind of evens out, if you will.
That's what I heard.
And the bond, the note that we have gives us the flexibility with the ability to increase that if we need to.
That's what I heard. Thank you.
The only thing I would emphasize that's already been said up here by several people and by the finance director, but to keep in mind, the reason the state, I will not suppose why the state continues to delay what their estimates are, but I think we all know what it means. It's going to be a very difficult task for them to also estimate these very important revenue sources that we receive as revenue sharing. So right now they're saying they're coming out in about a week or within 2 weeks. But that will have a major factor, as the mayor pointed out. Right now, we're showing that 750,000, but that's all dependent on how much reduction there is from the state on those revenue sharing numbers. And those will still be estimates on their part as well.
And at this point, we've not factored in any reduction, is that correct?
There are some reductions factored in. My best estimates at this point, but some of those revenue sources for next year, just kind of unknown. For the most part, I budgeted revenues flat in 21 to where I think they're going to be in 20.
So I think what I was advocating is that it is in our best interest to have more money in unappropriated reserves as these numbers adjust. And I suspect they'll be lower than that as the trends are going that way. We have that flexibility. In the past, when things are more concrete, we can go in on an average of about 600 to 800 to $1 million in unappropriated. Right now, even with some adjustments, I suspect that number to be closer to the 1.4, 1.5 range after they adjust. So there'll be flexibility because as that drops, you have that flexibility. The good news in the budget in the past is we've always had a CAFR adjustment to the positive. The way CAFR adjustments are is that we budget something, we spend less. We budget something, we spend less. And that's what my simplification of trying to keep unappropriated reserves more plentiful to give us that flexibility. But, would anyone mind if we take a 5-minute break? Thank you. Let's come back at, how about we'll do 5 after 11. Thanks.
Okay.
James?
I was gonna ask.
Sure, let me just end this so that you're not on here.